Hello. Um, I wanted to discuss the concept of seasons and the concept of a calendar and times to do different things. We learn in the book of Ecclesiastes there's a time for everything, and certain times are auspicious for different things. Time to live, a time to die, that's obvious. Time to plant, a time to sow, or reap. Um, there's just a time set up for everything, and that's the way the universe is created. And the most obvious times are the seasons of the solar year. You have springtime when it's a time to plant, summer when growth occurs, the autumn when when crops are harvested, and the winter when there's things wait and for rejuvenation and prepare for rejuvenation in the springtime. And these all have their set times and their set purposes. And on a spiritual level, we have the lunar cycle that occurs that has more of a spiritual changes that occur during that cycle. The earlier before the giving of the Torah time, earlier time for mankind, the solar year was the most important. Obviously, the people would, the harvesting and the reaping, the sowing and the harvesting were very important. Days when you had more sunlight to do work, days when you had less sunlight and you could rest. Everything made sense, and there was an awareness of the lunar cycle. And there was also an awareness of the various planets as they worked their way across the sky, day to day. And there's a significance, and it was more aware at that time than it would be in modern day when we have light bulbs and we don't even see the sky. But there was an awareness at that time of these things. The giving of the Torah, when the Torah was given, the first law that was given, and the giving of the Torah sort of began at the time of the burning bush. The first law that was given was the commandment to establish a calendar. Moses was given a job to establish a calendar, and he did this. At that time, the year began in the springtime in Nisan, which is different from what we would consider Rosh Hashanah, which is more of a universal, but the Jewish calendar began in Nisan. And it was set up in such a way that Nisan, the particular month in the spring, would always change the same. It would always be the same, always be in the same season. It would always be in the springtime. And that's because there was a uniting of the spiritual and the physical universe at that time. And there was a necessity to have a calendar that would keep the months and the years brought together, and that was to establish the Nisan as the established in the springtime, and everything else would also be for the 12 months of the year, or 13 months as it turned out to be sometimes. It had to be kept in sync. And so all the holy days that were talked about in the Torah, that were explained in the Torah, would also remain within the proper seasons. They may change by a month this way or this or that way, according to the how it conjoined with the solar year, but it was always kept within a short range. This is opposed to the Muslim calendar that doesn't connect the two. The Muslims have a harder time understanding the physical and spiritual worlds as being interconnected, and so their calendar changes constantly. Ramadan, which is the most known in the West, confuses people because it's different times of the year. over the course of time. It kind of rotates through the calendar. That would have occurred if the Jewish people, if Moses had not established the concept of a leap year to maintain a governor so that it was always kept at the same time. So we have the calendar is set up by Moses. It's for the sake of the Jewish people. The question is whether or not there's any application that the non-Jews can use with regard to the Jewish calendar. Perhaps the non-Jews should stick with the solar calendar, the calendar that most people are aware of. It begins in January, it ends in December, and there's months have nothing whatsoever to do with the lunar month. It's purely a physical understanding. It's a physical, it deals with the physical world. And the lunar, the spiritual aspects are not important for the solar year. There's an argument made that non-Jews should not bother themselves with the spiritual realm, and therefore we should not try to understand the Jewish calendar. However, there's also an argument that the non-Jew does have a spiritual side, and that the non-Jew can interact with the spiritual aspects of things. And certain aspects of the calendar, Adam would have been aware of Rosh Hashanah. He would have been aware of Rosh Hashanah is the day that Adam was created. It was like his birthday. So he would have been aware of that. And whether or not he understood that from a Mosaic calendar perspective, or if he understood it as a solar calendar, he was more aware of the solar year. But would it be acceptable for a non-Jew to be aware of Rosh Hashanah? Many of the rabbis have argued that non-Jews should be aware of Rosh Hashanah. The entire world is understood to be judged for the next year as to whether or not who shall live, who shall die, who will prosper, who will not prosper, who will have good health, who will suffer from not having good health during the next year is determined on Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, the rabbis who work with non-Jews, work with Noahites, have determined that it's useful for a Noahide to be aware of Rosh Hashanah and to prepare in the time before. They might say 4 days. They might say, there's a certain amount of time given for the non-Jew to prepare himself for the judgment that occurs once a year on Rosh Hashanah. There's other aspects. So that's for the sake of personal development. And there's other holidays that for the sake of personal development, non-Jews have been told that we can be involved in a reflective manner during these days. The weekly Shabbos, there are things that the non-Jew can reflect upon on the weekly Shabbos. We're told not to engage in Shabbos the manner that the Jew does, that we should behave in a weekday manner to the most part. However, we should be aware of the uniqueness of Shabbos, and we should reflect on things that can be of personal benefit, that help to develop the self. We can think about spiritual matters and try to become a better person. On Rosh Hashanah, on Shabbos, on many of the other days, we're given reflections that are beneficial to the individual for personal development. And a number of the holidays, this has been established for, that non-Jews can look at the unique qualities of these various days. For example, Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. Therefore, it's like you're going before the judge to be judged, and he's going to determine a sentence, hopefully for the better. Passover is a time of freedom. being freed from the things that bind us. You can say it's a time it would be a good time to give up smoking at the time of Passover. It would be auspicious time to give up things that are damaging us, such as smoking or whatever it is. The time of the time of Shavuos, which is the giving of the Torah, known in the West as Pentecost. That's a time when we could be aware that the Torah was given at Sinai for all of humanity. It's an auspicious time to reflect on this for the sake of personal development, to become a better person. And this can be true for many of the holidays. My personal feeling is that just as we've already established that Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, Passover, Pentecost, that these are acceptable for non-Jews to use because the timing is right. There's something in the air at that time that is auspicious. It's a good time for personal development to reflect on certain things, to behave in certain parts of our soul can be helped on these particular times. And we should look at those parts of our soul that can be best benefited on those days and work on them on those days. I would suggest that this is where it gets controversial and the rabbis kind of hold back on, but I would suggest that just as Rosh Hashanah, the time leading to that, which is, think of the judge is going to pass judgment. He's going to pass a sentence. A person heading towards that has a certain reflection, a certain feeling of need to get his affairs in order. After the judge has passed his sentence, made the judgment, passed the sentence, now there's a much more serious time of reflection that a person might have. If the judge says something that the defendant was not expecting, the person was not expecting, or he was fearing, but he was holding out hope that things would be better. He discovers that the person being judged discovers that the next year is not going to be as happy as he thought it would be. There is still a time of reflection where the person can ask for leniency. He can ask that the sentence against him be made milder. And there's ways that the person can do that. We're told that by charity, by prayer, by repentance, we can make the sentence milder. So that's the time of Yom Kippur, is the opportunity given. It's the time, and the quality is in the air. It's an auspicious time to ask for, at that time, ask for mercy. The person knows that he has a harsh sentence and he's asking for mercy, that the sentence not be as harsh. And that's different from the time before Rosh Hashanah. So we can look at the Jewish calendar. We can learn, non-Jews can look at the Jewish calendar. We can learn about the holidays, not that we're proactively participating in the holidays, but rather as on the level of reflection and on the level of personal development. And by doing so, we also can become better people. At least that's the goal. Thank you.